Hans smoked him, Niemann. Look what he's doing at this tournament of peace in Croatia. He's on 6.5 points. No one even close after 7 rounds.
Chess speaks for itself.
Column number 1 here shows all the opponents he's smoked so far. We've got Ivanchuk, Shaparinov, and today it was the turn of Ivan Sokolov, experienced grandmaster. And wait till you see the statistics for the month of November that I'm going to show at the end of this video. Hans on the most incredible winning streak right now. So he was playing with white today. He kicks off with e4, and we quickly head down this Italian game with bishop c4. We get bishop c5, the most aggressive placement of that bishop, and after c3, looking for a later d4, black puts a lid on it with knight f6, pressuring e4. You can immediately go d4, but a different variation. So d3 played, we get d6 supporting the centre, castles, pawn h6, very standard move in this structure, taking control of g5, knight bd2, standard developing idea, a5 gives some room on the queen side there, helps this bishop nudge back at times, and now rook e1 activates, castles, and this knight starts going on the standard manoeuvre. Black now does the same, looking to head for g6 later, c6, d5 potentially. But Niemann is now first to the punch in the centre with pawn to d4, and black now takes that pawn. Pawn recaptures, the bishop drops back. Now black's given white this phalanx of pawns in the centre. Look at all the squares they control. This is risky. What's the follow-up? Well, after h3 from Niemann, pushing d5 there, not so good. You open the bishop, you give this knight a square to start looking at. Well, now black goes d5. That's why I mentioned that white could have done it, but not so good. Now, what's the follow-up here? Well, you don't want to capture. After one of these knights takes back, black has a great pawn structure playing against the isolated queen's pawn. So e5 was played. And now if you take here, this is the follow-up. You're actually smashing up this king side, as we can see. If you take, you're ruining the king position. If knight f5, you still ruin the king position. So this is no good. We see knight e4, best move. Now bishop d3, threatening to take that knight and then win a pawn after recaptures. So what does black do here? Well, the most active response, great move, pawn c5. Challenging this strong centre, trying to undermine the base of the pawn chain. Was it Nimzovich maybe, my system, said to do that? And you're liberating this bishop. So what does Hans do here? He's got different ideas. He could take here, bring the knight here, but he goes to knight g3. He always plays in these kind of interesting ways. So he's offering black the chance to shatter the pawns. Does black want to do this? Well, no. Sokolov decides not, even though it was the computer's top move. We see bishop f5 played instead. Hans could start liquidating stuff on e4, but he decides to go for this one. Pick up that bishop pair, knight recaptures, although then instantly give it right back. The tension in the centre had become critical, and after pawn recaptures, Hans takes here. He's now a pawn to the good, but after queen d5, picking up a tempo on the rook, rook g4, we can see that black is about to win the pawn right back on d4 in one way or another, because white can never take here right now. There's a pin, the queen will drop off the board, it's unprotected. So because this pawn can't take, black takes a timeout to go king h8, thinking about all these kind of nasties with the rook lined up there, and now queen d3 from Hans. He targets the knight on f5, and so it jumps in, takes on d4. Now maybe Sokolov overlooked this next brilliant move. He was perhaps expecting just a liquidation on this square, which is playable, but Hans uncorks a brilliancy here. He springs the knight forward into a square it's got no right to be on with that pawn on h6, and he's threatening mate in one. Now the knight was captured, but the computer's favourite move here is pawn to g6. blocking the mate and then making this knight actually retreat. You can come to f3, you can come to e4 just to show one sample variation, and now the queen shouldn't take here, or bishop takes here, better for white. So what if you go h5, whoops, where are we, h5, well then the rook comes forward and bishop d8 attacks, but knight f6 jumps, chops, chops, queen moves. Okay, long variation, but this is something that could have happened with g6, roughly level. But g6 not played. Pawn takes knight on the board. What's Hans' big idea after the very simple bishop recaptures? Well, there's a huge mate in 2 threat. You know, say you just win a clean pawn here. Well, then there's rook h4, check, king moves, and that lands the checkmate. And if coming back here you try and block it out with pawn g6, well then you get slayed on these dark squares. Absolutely brutal. You can do it like this and this, or you can crash straight through if recaptures. That's mate in 1. If you move somewhere, well, okay, where's the mate? Rook g7, queen comes in, finishes it wherever the king ends up. So that's the problem with g6. That's the threat if you do nothing. And so that's why Sokolov played this next move of chucking a piece back. He's got nothing better. He has to stop the mate threat, and this is the best way to do it. You check the king, and if the pawn captures, well, the queen takes. You know, your queen's undefended on d3. So the queen has to take. This is what Hans plays. Now Sokolov chops off the ladies. Pawn recaptures, looks like he's fine, but in this whole skirmish over here, Hans did win a pawn, so he's now a pawn ahead. Now what should black do here, you know, on the worst side of an endgame? Well, bishop c7, top move. If f4, then f6. You get a bit more active play, you know, something like this one a little bit blocked out and everything. That was the square to put the bishop on, but it drops to d8 here, challenging this piece, but Hans drops the bishop back, and these pawns for black are really clumsy. We get bishop covering with bishop e7, king h1 now from Hans. Slightly weird looking move when you first see it. You know, why not king h2? I'm guessing prophylactically he didn't want it on the same colour as the black bishop for his enemy, even though there's pawns in the way at the moment. So he brings the king there, no doubt looking for a double on the g file later. We get rook fe8 activating, x-raying this pawn. So f4 now played, bishop f8 activates the rook. Now a4 from Hans, and this is nice astute endgame play, locking down this one on a dark square. Rook a6 lifting into the game, bishop d2 looking to keep that rook honest, staying with the pawn. The computer now wants some f5 counterplay stuff, but c4 was played, getting one of those pawns off a dark square, looking for bishop b4, but now bishop c3, rook h6 targets that pawn, king h2 covers, leaving this square 3, bishop b4 looks for an interception of this strong piece, but now rook ag1, and Hans just starts probing. We get g6, but now he flicks back to the d file. Magnus-esque play here in the endgame. Rumour has it Magnus Carlsen is now working with Hans Niemann as his second. It explains this technique. That's a joke. They are definitely not working together. But great endgame play from Hans. We now get takes on c3. Pawn recaptures, and now look at this. Rook e7 to stop one threat of invasion. Now we get rook d5 hits the pawn, pawn covered. Rook d6, sorry, d4 hits the pawn, pawn covered. Now rook d6 hits the pawn, and the pawn wasn't even covered. Sokolov resigned, because if he covers this pawn, well, not only can you come here behind this one, but f5 is really good. You can't take, or you get mated in 1, capturing the rook. And if something like king h7, well, then you can play something like this, and it's just an amazing endgame. The king marches in, the rook's still completely dominating this one. Game over. Now check out these stats, right? Because if you go on the live chess ratings here, there is no other top 100 player that has gained as much as Hans Niemann this month. Where is he now? Number 43 in the world, up 36 places, plus 30.1 this month. You know, this tournament he's in right now, a tournament performance rating of over 3,000. He is on fire. Very interesting, as Kramnik would say. And by the way, I'm in no way suggesting that Niemann is cheating. I'm just making a joke, right? If you go on a good winning streak right now, watch out, because Big Bad Vlad could be on your ass. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this game. Thanks very much for watching. Do hit subscribe to never miss a future video, and I hope to see you again soon. Cheers.